So is our final is it going to be like a standard 100-question test or something like that?
Final is a 100-question exam. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
How much
hard?
is it?
Comprehensive. I want to say it's 40% new. 60% new, 40% comprehensive. And then you have the last 3 chapters of Reagan as well. Okay?
So it's all other things.
Is that part of the new?
Is that what?
Is that part of the 60% that's new? Or is that
That's part of the 60% that's new. Yes. Yes. All right. So, let's pick up where we left off in 1961. JFK, as I said, hits the ground running. Poor guy, he does not get a chance to learn the basics of the job. 1961, he has a meeting, a summit between the USSR and the United States. Now, Stalin had died in 1953. He is replaced by a man by the name of Nikita Khrushchev. He is the new premier of the Soviet Union. Khrushchev is concerned about something that is going on in Berlin. Now remember, since World War II, Berlin has been divided. It has Free Berlin and Communist Berlin. Originally, West Berlin had been divided into 3 different categories, with the French, the United States, and England composing West Berlin. What's happened now since that time period is England and France have just said, America, you go at it. And it's all become basically American sector, communist sector. Now, what divides the two? What? The what? Okay. Was the wall always there? No, it was not. At this time period, it's more like a checkpoint. Okay? You just go through it and you can freely go. But here's the problem. By 1961, East Berlin has lost 3.5 million people. And the 3.5 million people that have gone to visit family in West Berlin have not come back. And they are doctors, they are lawyers, they are professors, they are scientists, they are upper middle class to higher class citizens of Berlin. They have left and they're not coming back. This constitutes what is known as a brain drain. Why? Because the best and the brightest are leaving. Why are they leaving? Because they're the best and the brightest. They realize what's happening, so they decide that they are going to go. Khrushchev is not going to stand for this. So the reason this summit is held is to figure out what to do with this brain drain. In this conference, JFK is revealed to be the naive, very untested, very undiplomatic person that he is. See, one of the things about JFK is that he has a lot of problems. One of the problems he has comes from the World War II. During the Battle of Leyte Gulf, he was on board. He was commander of a patrol torpedo boat, PT Boat 109. On this boat, during the Battle of Leyte Gulf, he was in a fog bank, and because the engine was diesel and it ran constantly, you actually had to put it in neutral to make the engine go down so you could actually hear something. And it was foggy. Well, he did that, which was common practice. And as a result, what was happening, he was listening to try to see what was going on, if he could find out where the bad guys were, when a Japanese destroyer comes out of nowhere and splits his boat smack in half. Most of his crew die. He saves one friend who was hurt very badly. He's hurt very badly, doesn't realize it yet. And he tries to swim to safety. As he's swimming to safety, his friend who is injured is bleeding. What happens in the blood and water? Shark comes up and eats his friend off the back of off of his back. JFK was injured. His back was injured severely in this incident, and it causes a lot of problems. He's on a lot of medication for that. Another thing that is, one of those things we find out about JFK afterwards, is he had a penchant for prostitutes. And he wasn't, he's the President of the United States. You'd expect high-quality prostitutes. No, he liked the $10 ones. They came with a lot of extra gifts that they left you afterwards. Most likely, he was suffering from syphilis. Okay? He's probably in late-term degeneration of his nervous system as well. He was on a lot of medication for his back. He was on a lot of medication for syphilis as well. So, he can only work about 3 hours a day without getting completely just drained. Khrushchev discovers that and makes the meetings run longer. Since he makes the meetings run longer, JFK just can't keep up with them. JFK is completely outmaneuvered by Khrushchev, and when he returns in a show of force, JFK calls up the reserves. Now, why do you call up the reserves? It's a step you take before you go to war. So he calls up the reserves, as this is something that is going to happen. This is something I'm going to do. He's kind of like rattling his saber at the Russians. Khrushchev is going to erect the Berlin Wall overnight. Now, not the concrete one you know of. You may have seen at the George Bush Library. What it is, at first, it's just basically barbed wire. And it's going to divide Berlin. That's going to go up in 61. Over the next 10 years, it's going to be replaced with the concrete wall that you all know. And let's see, I'm trying to think of when you guys were mainly born. Let's see. Most of you were born prior to after the wall fell, I'm sure, because that fell in '89. I don't even want to guess when you guys were born, because that's kind of frightening for me. Also in 1961. JFK is going to turn his attention to Vietnam. He's going to call for an increase in military advisors, and they are going to provide air support for ARVN. Okay. What does ARVN stand for? Army of the Republic of Vietnam. Okay? The Army of the Republic of Vietnam. To help them out, we are going to launch 2 operations. Operation Farmgate, which is the Army, and Operation Shoe Fly. This is the Navy. Both of these are going to be designed to help ARVN defeat the Viet Minh forces.
Wait, is it the Marines?
What did I say for Shoe Fly?
Navy.
I said Navy. Okay, I'm sorry. Marines. It's all right. It's Marines. Operation Shoe Fly is the Marines, yeah. We don't really have a big naval presence there. You'll see what happens when we send a destroyer in a little bit later. Now, this leads us to yet another issue with Cuba. Now, remember, JFK's got egg on his face due to the Bay of Pigs invasion. Complete debacle. Something we really haven't talked about in class in regards to the Cold War is that the United States and its allies have been, or the United States has been using its allies to station nuclear missiles in their lands in Europe. These nuclear missiles, very close to Russia, were aimed at Russia, able to destroy Russian cities. Russia doesn't have an easy counter to that because they don't have any allies in the Western Hemisphere. Or do they? 1962, Khrushchev, no longer willing to allow this situation to continue, arranges for nuclear weapons to be shipped to Cuba to be aimed at the United States. On October 14th, 1962, a U-2 plane, which is a high-altitude surveillance plane, is going to discover what looked to be missile parts, missile containers, and missile delivery vehicles in Cuba, right off the coast of the United States. This sets off the 13 days of October. This is probably the closest the United States will ever come to nuclear war. JFK is unwilling to let Khrushchev put nuclear missiles that close to the United States. He orders a blockade on October 22nd and refuses to allow any ships to come in. Khrushchev announces that this blockade will not be allowed to stand, and on October 24th, ships freighters are seen heading towards Cuba. Now, to this day, we do not know exactly what were on those ships. However, human intelligence had told us, CIA spooks in the field told us that they were nuclear missile parts to complete the process. As these ships were getting closer to Cuba, Khrushchev would send a series of telegrams to JFK, telling him not to push them, because he was going to do this. He was no longer going to be willing to allow the United States to have missiles in Turkey pointed directly at the USSR when he could not do something similar. Well, here's the deal. JFK is like, we've got missiles in Turkey still? And his advisors say, yeah, we do. We have some. They're old technology. They're scheduled to be replaced and to be removed, but they're still there. Why haven't they been removed? Well, you know how the bureaucracy is. It takes a while. Says, oh, okay. So what happens is JFK has his Attorney General, who happens to be his brother, Robert F. Kennedy, talk to the Russian ambassador to the United States and says, hey, we're going to pull those out. Okay, he's not saying we'll pull them out and replace them, which we were going to. We're going to pull those out. So he says, we'll pull them out. Okay, you just let Khrushchev know. We're going to pull them out. You and me, we're having a talk. As a result, once Khrushchev finds out about that, on October 28th, those ships are going to turn around and leave. They never get to Castro. As a result of this, Khrushchev is made to look weak by the ruling council of the Soviet Union, and he is forced to resign his office later in the year. So he actually loses his position because of this. It's not exactly because of this. It's one of the many reasons. One of the major reasons he loses it is because in a speech before the Politburo, which is the ruling authority, he says, well, maybe Stalin wasn't correct on all matters. He's lucky he lived. Now back to Vietnam. 1963, the turning point of the Vietnam War. Battle of Ap Bac. For January 2nd, 1963. We had been training ARVN. We had sent troops over there. We had sent supplies. They fought the way we trained them to fight. That was what they did. That was how they did it. It was what we wanted them to do. At the small Vietnamese village of Ap Bac, 200 North Vietnamese troops take position overlooking the city. Is it going to work? Nope, it doesn't work. Is going to take the city, take position on the levee right here. 200. ARVN is going to respond by sending in 2,000 ARVN troops. 200 versus 2,000. What's going to happen? Who's going to win? They're outnumbered 10-1. Every single battle that has occurred before this point, when faced with overwhelming odds, the Viet Minh pack up and get out of town. They're gone. They hit the road. Not this time. ARVN is supported with 5 helicopters and around 15 armored personnel carriers. In the battle that takes place, the Viet Minh do not retreat. They're actually able to bring down 4 of the helicopters and destroy several of the armored personnel carriers. They lose 200 soldiers, and ARVN retreats. Now, during this entire time, Lieutenant Colonel Paul Van is acting as a spotter. He's up here in a plane above everybody, telling ARVN where to go. Okay, they're all flying around. Okay, let's put a jet engine on the back of it. Okay, he's spotter. He's looking down and telling them how to maneuver. Outnumbered 10-1, and they still lose. Arvin can't win this war. It's not possible. You can train them as much as you want them to, but you cannot make them fight as hard as they could possibly fight when they're fighting their brothers over something that is, difference between communism and capitalism. Okay? Freedom and non-freedom. Okay? Having things and everybody and the government owning everything. Well, if you don't own anything, what's this whole concept about? If you're absolutely poor and don't have anything, what's the difference? How many guys have played a football game or sport, some type of sport before in your life? Okay? And how many of you had, your head wasn't in the game? What happens when that occurs? You lose, right? Why? Because your head's not in the game. You're not giving it your all. As a result, Arvin's not giving it their all. Therefore, what happens? They lose and they retreat. Now, JFK realizes that the fault here has to lie with the president, and that is Diem. So this is what happens. JFK makes a decision that Diem has got to go. He tells the CIA, get rid of him. CIA then approaches Arvin and says, hey, something was had to happen to Diem. We wouldn't have a problem with Arvin leading Vietnam. November 1st, 1963, Diem is assassinated by his own forces. Now, speaking of assassinations, in 1963, JFK is very worried. You know why he's worried? What had happened the year he was elected? It was a zero-numbered year. And if we know anything about zero-numbered years, you don't want to be elected in zero-numbered years because that means you are going to what? Die. It means you're going to die. Well, I don't think he was very concerned about this. He should have been, as we all know what happens to him. But what he is concerned about is the vote in 1960. Was it a landslide or was it close? How close was it? Closest we've had, I want to say ever. And as a result, he doesn't want that to happen because all presidents want what? A second term. As a result, he's dedicated himself in 1963 to make tours of all across these cities and areas that he did not do very well in to try to get more support, to try to drum up, people to vote for him. November 22nd, 1963, he's in Dallas, a state that he did fairly well in. His vice president's from Dallas anyway, LBJ. And he is planning on, he's planning on getting a huger margin of votes from them in the 1964 election. He's driving down the middle of Daley Plaza he's not driving, he's being driven down the middle of Daley Plaza in Dallas, riding in the presidential limo, which at that time was a convertible. You would think perhaps that would not be a good idea. I will tell you it's the last time that a presidential vehicle is a convertible, wherein he is shot supposedly by 3 bullets from Lee Harvey Oswald from the 6th floor of the Federal Book Repository. Now, because Lee Harvey Oswald shoots him with a bolt-action rifle and gets 3 shots off on target at a moving target, a lot of people say that can't be done. Hence the whole, second gunman, third gunman type thing. Whole conspiracies that have developed since then. Now, is there any truth to those? I think that the truth comes from the fact what we have learned in the last couple of years about JFK. Because by 1963, his back and other ailments had gone to be such a problem. In order for him to actually sit up and walk straight, upright, he had to wear a steel brace at all times. And it wasn't just like something running straight up his back. It was like a mesh, steel with a mesh, almost like armor that went around him. So when the bullet hit him in the back of the neck, and it was going down at such an angle, it's going to come out of his body, and it's going to hit what? Steel. And what happens when steel meets steel? It ricochets. So what it does is it plays a game of ping pong inside of him. Eventually it comes out, and it lands in Tom Connolly, the governor at the time. It embeds it in his arm.
Is he going to get syphilis now?
No. So what happens? JFK is taken to the hospital. JFK is taken to the hospital where he is pronounced dead on arrival. Lyndon Baines Johnson is going to be sworn in as the president later in the day on board Air Force One. Now, Lee Harvey Oswald, who killed JFK, is going to go and be he's going to be arrested. He's going to be found in a theater. A whole bunch of weird conspiracies, similarities between between Lincoln and Kennedy. If you look those up on Google, they're kind of neat. Some of them are way out there. Some of them are just kind of some of them will make you go Now, Lee Harvey Oswald is kept at the Dallas Police building. There are a lot of death threats being made against him, so they decide they're going to move him to a more secure area. Well, as they're moving him to a more secure area, Jack Ruby, who is a former boxer and nightclub owner, comes up to him and shoots him in the stomach with a snub-nosed .38 revolver. He is apprehended. He's asked, "Why'd you do it?" And his response is, "I don't know." Later, he would say, "Well, he didn't want Jackie O to go through the process of having to sit through a trial for Lee Harvey Oswald." That doesn't make any sense. We're going to kill a man? Well, eventually he's going to die in jail. Whole bunch of conspiracies there too. Whole bunch of weird stuff. Now, brings us to 1964. 1964, LBJ decides, as president now, that the United States has to increase their involvement in Vietnam. And the best way to do that is to have some form of altercation occur between the United States and North Vietnam. It's worked in the past. The Maine, Lusitania, the Arizona. Something happens. It pulls the United States in, makes them more committed. So he tells his National Security Advisor, McGeorge Bundy, to draw up a resolution calling for increased United States involvement in Vietnam. He's going to get his wish when a report comes that the USS Maddox, a destroyer that is in the Gulf of Tonkin right here, is attacked by patrol boats, North Korean patrol boats. The Maddox responds and completely obliterates the 3 patrol boats that is attacking it. Now, conspiracy theory-wise, that seems kind of odd because there are no pieces of wreckage to show that this actually ever occurred. It's important because we're going to get a little bit further. But when we get a little further, you'll see why it's important. But you don't incinerate something by blowing it up. If you hit something with a 12-inch shell, even if it is made of wood, something is going to survive. Right? It's kind of like the people who have a whole issue with the Pentagon, the plane that hit the Pentagon on September 11, 2001, because there was nothing left of the plane. It just hit and boom, it completely incinerated it. Now, big old plane loaded with a lot of gas, hit something traveling very fast. I can see something like that happening more likely than something like this. But the attack gives LBJ the intro that he needs to issued the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution calling for more United States involvement in North Korea. This brings us to the election of 1964. The Democrats are going to nominate LBJ. The Republicans are going to nominate a Arizona shopping center magnate by the name of magnate, not a magnet, things don't stick to him, magnate by the name of Barry Goldwater. In this in this election, you have the infamous Daisy ad. Now, for those people watching us on the recording, go Google it on YouTube. You can Google it on YouTube as well. But because of the way things are working right now, I'm going to have to pause this.
What was that?
What was what? The commercial?
I just saw you.
That only aired once. But that is probably the most famous political commercial of all time. The guy speaking was Barry Goldwater. That came from an actual speech where he said, "We must all love each other, or we die." What is he saying? You're going to elect a guy like that president? We're all going to get along, and I'm just going to blow the whole world up. Needless to say, you see an ad like that, and then you see the results of an election like this. Red is Goldwater. Come on.
They want to bomb
Can't you get a clip?
Yeah.
They're what?
They want to bomb the bill.
Yeah. It's absolutely insane. So, when LBJ came into office, he started setting up what is going to be called his Great Society. He's not going to actually call it that until after he wins his own term. But as soon as he becomes president, he launches a war on poverty. The war on poverty spent something like $40 billion since '64, and it's so great because now there's no poverty, no poor people in the world at all. Everything is absolutely wonderful. We all live in peace and harmony, holding hands and singing Kumbaya. Right? No! There'll always be poor people. That's just how life is. Absolutely absurd. I read an article yesterday that most of the reason our debt is so high today, the $14 trillion, is because we're still paying on a lot of the stuff that was started under the Great Society. In 1964, Congress passed the Economic Opportunity Act. It created Job Corps, which provided a form of job training. You'd go out, you'd actually learn in the field. Created Head Start, which is a form of kindergarten for disadvantaged youths. Work-study programs was created to help out people who were going to college. Grants were made to small farmers and businesses. And then VISA, Volunteers in the Service to America, was created. That is a neighborhood empowerment plan designed to foster neighborhood community growth. In addition to having this being taped on integrity, I've also put, for our students who aren't here because of the tax test, put all the PowerPoints online. So if you don't get it, you can get it there. Now, after he comes into his own, after LBJ becomes President of the United States, he is able to really push the Great Society, especially with a mandate of that size, push the Great Society into what he wants it to be. In 1965, the Immigration Act is going to be passed, and this is going to abolish all quotas on national origins. Remember we talked about that from the 30s.
Wilson Johnson.
Yes, it was. Now he's abolishing it entirely. Well, it's not an issue. Remember, I gave you the example about the kind of problem he ran into with that Jewish couple that was trying to come in from Germany. They're trying to escape Hitler. He actually had to arrange for them to go to Cuba because all the Jews, the Jewish people from Germany quota had been met for that year, so he actually had to arrange for them to fly to Cuba, be given a set of Cuban passports to fly into the United States as Cuban Jews instead of German Jews, so they could come in that way and escape Hitler. The Highway Safety Act of '66 is going to be passed, which is going to provide regulations on safety for the vehicles that come off the assembly line as well as while they are being built. This is a direct result of a man by the name of Ralph Nader's book called Unsafe at Any Speed. Have you ever heard of Ralph Nader? Ralph Nader ran for President of the United States in 2000. His book was based on I was going to look it up. Book on the Corvair. I can't remember who made it. But it was a popular car. It was supposed to be a sports car. It looked really cool, really nice, and ooh, look at, looked really good driving it until you actually went like this, and the whole freaking car flipped over. Even at like 30 miles an hour, the car flips over. So in addition to this, certain standards of safety were required for the vehicles, as well as this new high-fangled invention. It was required with all vehicles. You know what it is? Seatbelts. Not the over-the-shoulder ones, just the lap belts. In 1965, Congress is going to pass the Voting Rights Act. The Voting Rights Act is going to be aimed especially at the South. Why? What has the South been doing for a very long time when it comes to voting rights? Finding a way to cheat people. Yeah, when it comes to cheating people, we're going to do it. So we had come up with ways to keep, the South had come up with ways to keep people from voting. And the way they did this was through intimidation or just saying, yeah, you can't register here. Nah, we don't let you register here. You're not going to be allowed to register here. Well, why not? Well, because you can't. Well, why not? Go along. Go along. You don't want me to call the sheriff and throw you in jail. And in areas where there was a historic precedence of voter intimidation or, just denying people the ability to register, it provided for federal groups to go in, federally supported groups to go in, force registration, people to be able to be registered, and then be there when it comes time to vote. Something else it did, especially in Texas, is it changed the residency requirements. See, previously, in order to vote in Texas, you had to live in Texas 1 year prior to voting. Then, if you wanted to live if you lived in a county, you had to live in that county 6 months before you were allowed to vote in a county election. Voting Rights Act of '65 changes that, and it changes it down to 30 days. 30 days residency in the state, 30 days residency in the county. So 1 year down to 30 days. 6 months down to 30 days. Now the last two, 24th Amendment and Harper versus School Board of Virginia, have to do with something called a poll tax. Now a poll tax is a tax you pay to vote. Now why would you have to pay a tax to vote?
So that if you were poor, you wouldn't be able to vote?
No, we'd never do something like that. Josh, why would we do? Why would you need a tax to vote?
To keep out lower income.
Man, you guys have got the worst attitude. Don't you know taxes are there to help people? Elections are expensive. You got to get the room. You got to get the little machine that counts the ballots. You got to get the ballots printed. You got to get people to actually be there. Come on, guys. Keep people from voting. That's wrong, okay? Gosh. All right. So what happens is this takes care of that. And back in 1901, it was $1.75. $1.75. Well, $1.75 isn't that much money, is it?
But you could buy like a...
Here, I know where you're going. Back when I found $1.75, one day I got thinking, hey, I wonder how much $1.75 was back in 1901. 1901, $1.75, and I found something in my frame of reference. I was looking at buying my first house. My first house cost $100,000. So I was like, okay, let's see how much is it how much is it going to go for? So $1.75 was the poll tax in 1901. A 4-bedroom, 2-bath house with electricity was $1,000. So, what's $75,000? And guess what? The elections are in November. Poll tax had to be paid in July. You got to have the money up front. See, it's not aimed at keeping people from voting. It's just to help the states do that because they don't get that money from anywhere else, right? Wrong. Who is it aimed at? It is aimed at keeping the poor, especially the African Americans, from voting. We don't want them to vote. They're poor. There's a reason they're poor. Right? There's all a reason everybody's poor. And as a result, we want to have this tax. You can pay this tax, and as a result, then you can vote. And you got to show your little form that you paid. So you got to hold on to it from July to November, which is always easy to do with a piece of paper. I can't even get you guys to hold on to your syllabi for a semester. Of course, back then you can't keep it. Now I've got my syllabus on the web. You guys don't. They didn't have access to web back then. It wasn't very good. Not many computers connected yet. So what happens is the 24th Amendment, somebody's like, hey, they didn't have computers back then, did they? Yeah. No, they didn't. Except for the ones at Area 51. The 24th Amendment and Harper versus School Board of Virginia are two issues that deal with the poll tax. The 24th Amendment, 1964, abolishes poll taxes at the federal level. Harper versus School Board of Virginia abolishes them at the state and local levels. So now they are, boom, completely gone. Oh, good. I see my correction's still up there. Now, in early 1965, McGeorge Bundy, the National Security Advisor for LBJ, is in Vietnam. He's touring a base when that base is attacked by Viet Minh forces. What happens next is, what happens is he goes back, tells LBJ, this LBJ gets mad, and decides what's going to happen is we are going to just bomb the hell out of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Now the Ho Chi Minh Trail is this series of networks of, in some areas it is going to be paved, but just basically roads that go all the way from North Vietnam to South Vietnam. But look, where does it go through? It goes through Laos, and it goes through Cambodia. Who are we at war with? When I say war, who are we waging war against? We haven't declared war against anybody. Who are we waging war against? North Vietnam. Who are we bombing? Laos and Cambodia. Well, why are we doing it? Because that's where Ho Chi Minh, being a very intelligent man, is going through neutral Laos and neutral Cambodia. It makes sense. So what happens is we, in order to get them, are going to bomb the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Now, I had a teacher who, for Western Civ, when I was in high school, my junior year, and he was in Vietnam. And when he talked about the Ho Chi Minh Trail, he just kind of laughed and shook his head and said, it's all forest. Bombing the forest doesn't do anything except kill a whole bunch of monkeys. We're sending B-52 bombers, the biggest bomber in the history of the world. From March of 65 through November of 68 to bomb a peasant on a bicycle taking supplies along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So you blow that peasant up. You know what they're going to do? Get another peasant and send them down. Within 6 months, it is revealed to be a complete and utter disaster. However, the government, being the government, continues it until November 68. It's called Operation Rolling Thunder. Now, LBJ now realizes by March of 65 that something else has to be done to control communism there. Remember how I said at the very beginning of Vietnam, how the heck did we get here? And I said we did it incrementally. Little by little by little by little by little. Now we're going to send combat troops in. Now the first combat troops arrive in March of 65. They are under the command of General William C. Westmoreland. General William C. Westmoreland. Now, what they're going to do is they're going to wage a war of attrition. In World War II, when I showed you that huge map I had up there, and I hit the button, what was happening? That was a war of conquest. What was occurring? We were conquering land, we were freeing the land, and we were slowly marching on a center to attack and lay siege and eventually take Berlin. Yes? Okay? Where are we going to do that here? We're not. There's nothing similar to a central hub of support. What we're going to do is launch a war of attrition. All right? We're going to try to kill more of them than they kill of us. In 1965, for every one American we were losing, we were able to kill 40 Vietnamese. That's a good deal. We're going to go, how many guys have seen We Were Brothers? We Were Soldiers. Okay? We Were Soldiers. What do? They fly in with the helicopter, they land, they kill everything around them, the helicopter comes back in, takes off, and leaves. What have they done? Do they hold on to that hill? No. If you take a rock and you throw it into a pond, what happens? Well, it sinks, but what happens? There's a hole there for a second, right? And then what occurs? Comes right back. Same thing with the Viet Minh. You can kill them, but unless you try to take the land, and you can't take the land. I mean, because, once again, this isn't Korea. I mean, Korea, you can do that. You can push them all the way back to here, but what are you going to do? Push them to here, and then what? They're going to attack you back there. So they're going to wage a war of attrition. 1 to 40. Yes, ma'am?
Did they get permission from Laos and Cambodia to bomb their
Did they?
side?
What are they going to do?
I guess, but didn't that make them like upset or something?
Sure, let them complain.
Okay.
Now, this brings us to the Battle of Ia Drang. 14th through 18th November 1965. In this battle, the North Vietnamese Army attacks U.S. Special Forces and the Ia Drang Valley. For the first time, the B-52, here she is going to be used tactically to be called in to drop bombs on North Vietnamese forces. Now, what is... At first, the way this works out is it's great. Stratton, come up here. For this to work, let's put you right there, okay? Okay. Now, Stratton is the United States. I am a Viet Minh soldier. Okay, I'm shooting at him. Boom, boom, boom. He gets on the phone. No. Arc strike, drop him at this coordinates, blows me all to bits, right? What's going to happen after this battle is Giap is going to say, all right, we are going to press this. We're going to get so close to them that you could cling to his belt and beat the living crud out of him. That's what the Viet Minh are going to do. They're going to get this close. That close. Uncomfortably close. Hello, how are you today? All right, you're going to go sit down. Okay? They're going to cling the belt. They're going to grab the belt of the GI in front of them and fight that close, because what's going to happen if they call down an airstrike? Who are they going to get as well? They're going to get Americans, and as a result, they're not going to do it. So as a result of this new clinging to the belt policy that they're going to employ by the end of 65.
They stop wearing them.
No. The attrition goes down from instead of 1 to 40, which is completely acceptable to the higher-ups, to 1 to 12. What does that mean? We're still killing the same number, but they're killing what? More of us. All right. one of the things that I have a hard time teaching this part. I do, because so much of this stuff is just like, how does it all go together? It doesn't fit perfectly together as everything else does throughout, the first part of American history and this part as well. So we're going to throw some things in here that I'm like, hey, that's cool. That happened during this time. How many guys have ever heard of the TU Tower shooting? Most of you had. We're Texans. Okay? What happens is, well, some of us, from other places, but you're here now. On August 1st, 1966, Charles Whitman, a former Marine, who had tried to get doctors to believe that there was, and understand that he believed that there was something wrong with him. And he did not know what it was. He thought it was a brain tumor, but you can't actually open your brain up and look for a brain tumor on yourself. And it involves invasive surgery. Is going to take a knife in the middle of the night and stab his wife in the heart. He's then going to go to his mother's apartment, on Guadalupe in Austin, and kill her. He's then going to take a small arsenal up to the top of the UT Tower and begin to systematically kill 16 people. 32 are going to be wounded. He is going to... It really opens up a flaw. It's just one of those things you don't know it needs to be dealt with or needs to be addressed until it actually occurs. No one is able to shoot him down from that height, the top of this building, because the police officers don't have rifles powerful enough to get up there. It's not something that is their standard issue. As a result, a lot of the officers go home and get their deer rifles to come back and try to shoot him from that area. Or, lo and behold, they get from some Longhorns who actually have a rifle. I know you guys are going to laugh when I say that, because Longhorns with weapons, that's frightening. That doesn't happen, and try to shoot them back. So Longhorns go out there and try to shoot them back with their deer rifles. Eventually what happens is they go and they get those rifles and they are able to kind of pin him down, and two officers, Officer Houston McCoy and Officer Ramiro Martinez, I've met Officer Martinez, are going to be able to get up to the top of the building, and as they turn a corner, one from each side, they shoot and they kill Charles Whitman. They don't know. Nobody knows which bullet really killed him, because he didn't say, "Oh, you got me." But he dies. Now, an autopsy is done. They discover that when they go to his house, that his wife is dead, and he had left a letter that he had typewritten that said, please understand, I'm sorry for this, but I can't get anyone to believe me. Bull, blankety blank. Please do an autopsy and look at my brain. Well, they did, and he did have a brain tumor, and it was on an area that would cause him to have irrational actions. Doesn't give him, he was in control of himself, and he did this. But that's where that comes from. As a result, cities across the nation start developing SWAT teams, the Special Weapons Action Armored Tactical Response Teams, or situations just like this. And then that's where we'll end. We'll pick up there on Monday.